The rear mudguard, number plate holder, tail tidy, or whatever you want to call it, is often one of the first things that a lot of people change after they've bought a new bike. And on the CB1000R, most people, it seems, tend to stick their number plate up there on the tail. Personally, I quite like having this nice, sleek, minimalist tail, so I'd rather leave it down here. Sadly, there's not a lot of parts available on the aftermarket to do this job, but in a better way. And the one that Honda have made, it's a case of nice try, but not quite. It's too big, there's too much plastic, the number plate light is huge, and I can tell you from experience that it does absolutely nothing to keep the rain off your back. So with nothing available in the aftermarket, the only thing you can do is a DIY job. So you guessed it, we're going to do a DIY job. In order to complete this mission, I've got the Kellermann KH2000, which I've got left over from the FZ1N, with built-in number plate light. Sadly, this model's been discontinued, but Kellermann do have a couple of other options available on the website. And to replace my stock indicators and make the tail end even more tidy, I've got a set of these beautiful little things, the Kellermann Atto Dark indicators. Look how small that is. It's littler than my fingertip. And to make sure we don't have any flashing frequency or canbus issues, we've got the Kellermann i.Lash H2 adapter, complete with Honda-specific plugs, so we should have a plug-and-play solution here to get everything working properly. And a small selection of adapters and extensions to make sure everything fits properly. The first job in this little mission is going to be to get the rear mudguard off. Having experienced that firsthand at the side of the road with the back wheel in, I'm going to take advantage of the single-sided swing arm, take the wheel out first. So, 19mm socket, engine in first gear, to stop the wheel from rotating. And I'm hoping to remove the wheel without taking off the exhaust pipe. Nope. And now that the back wheel's off, it's going to be a lot easier to get this back mudguard off and have a look at what we're dealing with underneath with the framework, starting with these 3 bolts on the back here. So then the number plate light comes free, gives me access to this bolt hidden underneath the rubber sealant here, back around the front. It releases the reflector, which then exposes another 2 bolts that we need to undo. But the mudguard itself is still being held captive by the wires, which themselves are being held in by this cable channel. That should now just pop out, and there we go. The whole thing is free. So now that we've got the framework completely stripped, to see what I'm dealing with, my plan really was to attach the Kellermann tail tidy on kind of like that, giving me a much neater look, but retaining the original frame here because I just don't have the tools, the skills, the space to make a new one of those. But the problem is we've got all sorts of bits and bobs here that are sticking out. Probably need to get rid of them, so I think I'm going to take this off, get all these bits trimmed down, make this as perfect as possible for fitting this thing onto it. It's always much easier with a flexible tool. Here we go. With that now off, we can send it back to the lab for modification and improvement. Oh, thank you very much. Now we can get on with the mods. Although my thinking's changed a little bit. When I was in the garage, I was already talking about chopping this top piece off, maybe trimming some bits off the bottom, but I've had a little bit of think about it, and I think I can do this without cutting anything off at all. And I'm going to do this by, first of all, removing the reflector from the Kellermann tail tidy, and instead of chopping this little nubbin at the top off, I'm just going to stick the original reflector in there. So then the Kellermann tail tidy can hopefully come about here on the original mounting holes. The number plate will then hide all of that unsightly plastic, although the reflector's a bit over the top, isn't it? So throw it all on the floor, come back to the Kellermann reflector. Streamlined look. Although now I'm thinking a bit of drilling might be in order so that I can raise this up a tiny bit. The more stuff I can hide with the number plate, the better. Then I'm going to take this original backing piece, washer for some spacing action, smash that on top, and then just to stabilise this bit on the back here, because it is still a little bit loose being only mounted on one point, a couple of spacey washers on there. And that has actually stiffened that up quite considerably now. Now I could always leave it like that. Just this central thing is pretty rigid, but then again, I think one bolt really isn't enough, considering this is soon going to have a number plate and some indicators attached to it, albeit the smallest indicators the world has ever seen. But still, I'm going to have to drill a couple of holes, stick some extra mounts in it just to give it some stability. And then poke them into my newly drilled holes. And then on the back, a couple of washers. Couple of nylock nuts, and that is fitted and nice and straight. So once we get the number plate on there, we should be looking pretty good. Very handily, there's a hole through the frame here, through which the wiring for the number plate light can poke, and also the indicators when we get that far. And this is where things are going to get a little bit exciting, because these little beauties are, as far as I know, the smallest LED indicators in the world, legal on the road in Europe. They are absolutely tiny. I knew that they were going to be little, but I didn't know that they were going to be this little. That is just ridiculous how small they are. And to facilitate the fitting of these little beauties, I've got a selection of extensions and adapters to allow me to fit them onto the holes that I've already got drilled. Obviously, if I had no holes drilled, I could just use the little extensions, but I've already got on each side a couple of badly drilled 8mm holes that I had for the micro rhombus indicators that I had before. So what I'm going to need to do to extend these tiny little flashes from out behind the number plate is, first of all, remove the nut from the cable. I'm then going to prepare two of these little extensions, and for the Attos, these are the only extensions that are available. I need to extend by 30mm, so I've got two 15mm extensions. I'm going to put a tiny little dab of thread lock onto that just to make sure it doesn't come loose. Change the angle of the indicator, screw one into the other as tight as I can get that finger tight, and that then goes into this adapter. Once again, all the way in, tight as I can get it with fingers. Take that nut off for now. Into that, down the barrel if you will, poke the indicator cables and then thread them all the way through until we get to the indicator, and then a tiny dab of thread lock. Screw them together, being careful not to twist the cables inside there. Tight as I can with the fingers. And there we go, that's the indicator extended and ready to go onto my tail tidy on the one side. Thread the wires through that uppermost hole because I want to get the indicator as close to the top of the number plate as possible. Wire through the nut. And that's when you realise that your calculations have been wildly inadequate because there isn't enough space for the nut in there, so I'm going to need to put some more spacers in. Right, so here we are again. Hopefully this might work a bit better. I've got a couple of extra spacers in there, but instead of going crazy with the spacers and having this thing get further and further away from the back of the bike, I've actually filed away a little bit of material from the framework there just to give the nut some space to rotate. And wiring through the nut as far as I can go with the fingers. Matron. And I'm going to work on the assumption that the reflector here is 90 degrees to the floor, so it's going to rotate Atto till it's at about the same angle. And then obviously exactly the same thing on the other side. And then with both indicators on, we are finished. Although there are a couple of little extras. I've had to put some extra spacers in here because the indicators weren't actually sticking out either side of the number plate, but with a few extra washers in there, they now poke out perfectly either side of the plate. Tidied up the wiring, put some heat shrink on everything to make it a bit tidier, and then run it through the back of this conduit piece here, which also needed a little bit of modification in the hole there, just to make the cable get into the tray properly. So that's finally everything onto the mudguard frame. All I need to do now is send this back to the garage, bolt it back on the bike, and then make some light come out. Heads up. Thanks very much. With the number plate as well. Right, now that we've got it back, let's get it back on the bike. Right, so that is the mudguard frame fitted back onto the swing arm with all of our cables and things nicely poking out the bottom corner here. Now that I've got those amazingly small little Kellermann indicators on the number plate down there, I have to take off the factory Honda indicators, and these things are held onto the bike by these weird little sticky outy construction things which are screwed in place underneath the pillion seat. So remove the rear seat, and then I'm going to take off this locking mechanism bracket plate thingy at the back here so I can better see what's going on underneath there. Tucked up here in the rear corners are two Allen bolts, and as we undo them, the indicators come completely loose. But we can't disconnect them just yet because the wires are still connected, so first of all I need to take off the front seat by undoing these two bolts at the back end, lift up the seat, And then in there next to the battery is where the indicators are connected. Chase the cables from the back here, around the left side, like a couple of buffalo girls. I should hopefully be able to just pull them through one at a time. And then threading those cables through, I should now be able to completely remove the indicator from the bike. Same on the other side. Now that has left some quite unsightly holes in the side of the bike. We've got these great big scoop outs, and there's actually holes in there where the wires came out, which aren't going to be very waterproof, but don't worry, I have a plan for them. We'll come back to them in a second. And so I can see what's going on and where the cable's going in here. If I just unscrew the Allen bolt on the top and the crosshead on the bottom of this airbox cover, and then I can pull the trumpet thingy out by unhooking the little rubber tabs and just pulling it as it's just stuck in there with a rubber seal. Then I can better see what's going on with the wiring loom. So if I pull that out, slide up the rubber sheath, and there are the connectors we're looking for the number plate lighting, these two. So if I disconnect those, then I can start running the cable back. First of all, round the foot peg hanger to where I've cleverly connected the Toro chain oil over, so I'll get rid of that. Then I can undo this clip by pushing it down with a screwdriver, pull that through and away from the swing arm, and then we get to this bit by the shock here where you can't really see it. So if I undo the coolant reservoir lid, you can see better what's going on in here with a bit of light. You can see that I need to do a little bit of jiggling with the screwdriver on one side to lever it up, then the other side, and that gets the clip out and I can pull it backwards, tuck it through underneath the hugger, pull all of the cable through. Then I just need to undo these two screws here on the swing arm, thread the cable through the ABS sensor wires, and there's another clip on the top of the chain guard here, which once again just needs to be undone with a set of long nose pliers from behind, clip them together, push them out, and the cable is free. The whole mudguard is now disconnected. So now I need somewhere to stick the i.Lash unit itself. I've decided to tuck it here underneath all of this cabling. So first I need to poke the i.Lash cables underneath this wiring loom, which involves a little bit of moving around the various connectors and auxiliary plugs. I can then poke the i.Lash unit underneath that wiring loom, tuck it down nice and snug. Then I'm going to tuck these cables alongside the fuse box, around the flasher relay, and that's where the plugs are that they need to be connected to. Just stick the relay back down on this little post, then I can connect the plugs, but oddly enough these are 2-pin plugs, but only one pin actually has a connection in it, so they have to be exactly the right way around, otherwise it won't work. There's 4 of them, 2 for each side, and these cables are going to be connected to the back end, so we'll leave them where they are. Right, so that is our mudguard completely off the bike, complete with its complete wiring loom all the way to the plugs that were in the main electrics of the machine. And my plan is to hijack this loom from this point and put these extension wires from the Kellermann i.Lash all the way to the indicators at the back of the bike. And I'm hoping I can do that by hijacking into this piece of sleeving because it's quite loose and floppy. So that means the first thing I need to do is to loosen off these little clips and clamps and things because they're all tightening it down, causing bottlenecks. But obviously, I want to use them again in the future, so what I need to do, flathead screwdriver in there, lever up the little locky bit. This is where a beautiful assistant would come in handy because I need a third hand. Go, push that through, and there's that clip. Fired across the garage somewhere. Back in a second. Right, that's that clip rescued from the dusty corners of the garage. We'll put that somewhere safe. Move on to the next one. And then I've reached the point that I cleverly marked where I'm going to trim the cables off. The moment that nobody likes with the bike that isn't yet out of warranty, cables are snipped. Put that on a high shelf, potentially never see it again. So that's off. I should now hopefully be able to just slide my cables into here. And I have altogether 2 black, 2 grey wires, 1 positive and 1 negative for each indicator. So wish me luck. It's like rodding a drain, only far more fiddly with less smell of poo-poo. Well, I've been cheating a little bit. I've cut some little slits along the length where the clips are, and I'll fix these up with a bit of heat shrink afterwards, because trying to push it all from the other end is a fool's errand. There we go, 2 little black wires, 2 little grey wires, so I can now connect up this end to the Kellermann unit inside the bike, this end to my loose wires coming out the back of the number plate frame. And before I go any further, I have actually patched up all the bits where I cut into the cable with a piece of heat shrink, so that looks as good as new. So now I'm ready to connect the tail end onto the back of the bike, and I'm going to do something a little bit crazy with that. I'm going to use one of these Tyco waterproof connectors. This is a 6-way connector. A 4 would be fine because I could combine all of the negatives together, but because I haven't got any 4s in storage, I'm going to use a 6, but this means that I can then separate all of the number plate lighting and the indicators from the bike if ever I want to take off the frame. So 3 bolts, disconnect, and I'm good to go. So if I were to go on a track day or something, I could just take the whole thing off, have a free back end. Ooh, misses. Before I put the connector on, put a bit of heat shrink on the end of each cable just to make them a bit fatter, because onto the end of each piece of wire goes one of these little waterproof boot jobbies, and by making the wire a bit fatter, you get a better, more waterproof fit with that little boot. Right, that's all them on. And this is going to be the cable coming from the bike, so that means we need the female connectors, 6 thereof, counting those out while I was heating the soldering iron, because just to be belt and braces, as well as crimping these in, I'm also going to solder them in place just to make sure nothing comes out. I don't want to be losing any light at an inopportune moment. So I'm just going to tin the ends of each of these cables, and each of them gets a little connector. And then soldered just to make sure. And then those 6 little crimped and soldered connections all get poked up the back end of this piece of the connector. And then any of these little sealy bits that haven't already found their way inside, you just poke in with a little screwdriver. They're all in there. Poke in this red retainer piece and we're good to go. And the other connector is basically the same story, slightly more pointy shaped connectors, and I can now meet those together. I declare you lumen wife. And then my plan is to fit this on top here. Obviously the existing clip thingy isn't really going to go around that, so I'm going to have to use a cable tie. The ABS sensor wire is kind of in the way, so I'm just going to relocate that. And that looks good, so hopefully I should now be able to just connect up the whole rear end, just like that. Reassuringly tight fit, so we've got a nice waterproof seal there. All of this cabling is nice and solid. Nothing's going to be wafting its way into the brake disc. I'm really happy with that. So now I can put all of this cable back in and chase it back to the front of the bike. At this point, those of you who've been paying attention will remember that I had one of these clips in place. Clips into that space there. And we can go around the other side, where there was ever so slightly different clip here. It then hooks onto that little nipple sticking out of the frame there. As far as I remember, that then comes up around the frame here and connects back into these little connectors up here. So what I'm going to do then with this is poke my indicator cables up there, so that hopefully when I slide this down back into its original place, there we go, 4 nice little indicator cables ready to be connected up to something. Now, I was about to say that this is getting to the exciting bit, but sadly I've just realised that even if I were to go complete beeline, these cables are going to be slightly too short, so I'm just going to extend them a tiny bit and business will be resumed. Right now I've got my fully prepared, heat shrinked up, nice and tidy, right and left or left and right, not quite sure which way around they are yet, but it's irrelevant at this point, and I'm going to just run those back across the electrical area, tuck them neatly down the side here, around by the top of the battery, and from the other end I'm going to take my fresh new wires, just to stop me from having any problems with them getting separated. I'm going to tape together and follow all of this cabling up here, but then head rearwards to pop out here to the left of the evap canister there, pull that all the way through. Oh, and we are practically connected. But before we get completely connected, I'm going to tuck all this away so I know exactly how much slack I'm dealing with. And that just rather oddly stuffs really tightly in there. Stuff the air trumpet back in. That holds all the wiring in place. And then the moment of truth. So I'm going to trim these back because they're way too long. I'm going to stick a nice big piece of heat shrink over this whole setup as well before I connect it, so that once it's connected I can more than anything just protect it from vibrations, because these PosiLock connectors, which come included already installed on the i.Lash from Kellermann, should give us a dust and water proof connection, and vibration proof as well, but I just like to have everything tucked up nicely. That is once again what she said. I'm going to offset these connections a bit just so it fits nicer inside the heat shrink. Connect to the black ones to begin with, because they're kind of irrelevant. They all end up going back to this point here anyway. So the first black one, undo the end of the PosiLock thing. all of that through the little collet-y jobby. That then screws onto the connector. Bosh, we've got a solid connection. So that's one down. And the two we're left with, which are green now, because I've extended them, I didn't have any grey wires. If this was coming directly from the Kellermann indicators, it would be the grey one. But on the i.Lash, there are actually 3 cables, a black one, a grey one, and a grey and white one. And for the Attos, the Micro S and the Rhombus S, you only need to use the grey one. Anything else, you use the grey and white one. So that means whatever you do, one of your cables is going to be left wanting. So I've just tucked that one inside of the heat shrink here. But anyway, we now don't know which one is left and which one is right. So what I'm going to do is to just quickly turn on the ignition, indicate to the left. If I now connect one of these up, and we've got flashing on the left-hand side. Just to check the theory, if I try on the other cable, there we go, flashing on the right-hand side. And that is them all connected up. Slide my pre-prepared piece of heat shrink over everything. Tuck that all neatly out of the way. And the job's a good one. And just to make sure, I go for the right indicator, left indicator, indicating from the left. What about the all fours? Yes, yes, yes. Everything is working wonderfully. So there we go, there is the newly modified tail tidy with its tiny, tiny, tiny little indicators. Newly separatable electrical connection there on the swing arm, and thanks to these little beauties, the tail end is looking proper tidy. But we're not quite there yet, because this hole is going to be a problem. Both from a styling standpoint, because it looks rubbish, but also because that hole definitely going to let some water in. So to fix this, I've got 2.5 packets of Sugru, a packet of cling film, and some soapy water. I'm going to stuff this hole with the cling film so that the Sugru doesn't stick to the plastic. I'm also going to stick the original indicator holding bolt through the cling film and then stick a nut on the back of it with a flange on it, but with the flange facing away from the nut so that the Sugru will grip it, and then I can use the bolt to hold this little rubber bung in place. Sneaky, hey? And the Sugru that I've got is mostly black, but I don't think I've got enough to fill all of these 2 spaces, so I've got some grey and white stuff that I've got left over from ages ago just to use as filler material. Just gonna pretty much stuff it up into the corner there, making sure to get it behind that nut and bolt. Actually, that cavity isn't quite as big as I thought it was. I know. So I think the black stuff might do it. That looks pretty good, but there is lots of fingerprints and bubbly bits, and that's where soapy water comes in. If I give that a squirt, I can then use a finger to properly smooth that down without it sticking to me. Although thinking about it, whatever I do, that's still going to be sticking out a little bit. Luckily with this stuff, once it's gone hard, you can actually sand it. It's quite possible that might be the order of the day. So I'm going to do exactly the same to the other side, and we'll see how it looks in the morning once it's gone dry. Okay, the timer's up, we're back in the garage. The Sugru has gone hard, but I will be completely honest. What I didn't realise is it only dries to a depth of 3mm in 24 hours, so this has actually taken the entire weekend, but it's completely solid now. So first of all, I need to take the bolt out. And this should hopefully then, with a little bit of a tug on the cling film, pop out of this little hidey hole there. And the little bit that was poking into that hole there, sadly that's broken off. I kind of expected that, to be honest, because it was a real pinch point. But this is what I've now got. And hopefully, once again, because this is all new territory for me, look at that. Cling film doesn't even stick to it. A perfectly moulded little rubber bung, which just fits beautifully in that spot there. That's awesome. For the finishing touch, I'm going to take a soft sanding block, wrap some 180 grit, wet and dry paper around it, and then have at it. And there we go. One custom-made Sugru rubber bung for the indicator hole on the CB1000R. So now, when I take my new rubber bung, plug it into that spot, it fits perfectly. Look at that, like it was made for it. So now I just need to stick the bolt back in the hole at the top. Not too tight because Sugru isn't the absolute best under tension. There we go, that bung is in there. Filling that gap left by those massive factory indicators absolutely perfectly. And of course, exactly the same on the other side. So with that done, the seat back on, and there we go. That is the rear end of the CB1000R, tidied up, minimised, and those massive factory indicators taken away in favour of these beautiful, tiny little Atto LED indicators from Kellermann. I am astonished by how bright they are, in spite of how incredibly tiny they are. That is a great piece of engineering from Kellermann. Mostly really happy with the way the tail tidies come out. I think this area maybe could be tidied up a little bit. These holes and things look a bit unsightly. They're going to catch some mud for sure, so maybe I'll get some more Sugru, make them some little rubber bungs as well. Also, this arm that's holding the number plate on, I think is still vastly over-engineered. It's far too chunky. I'd really like to replace that with something made out of some kind of metal tube, just to give it a far more classic and tidier look, but for now, I think this will just have to do. I think you'll agree that compared to stock, with that mudguard gone, it definitely looks a lot better. And that tail end just got all that more delicious without the indicators hanging out there in space. I hadn't done it yet, but I've heard lots of tales of people kicking their indicators off when they get on and off the bike. That's the kind of thing that I would definitely do, so I'm glad that they're now gone and that's not going to happen. And that brings us to the end of another exciting episode of this Honda CB1000R Refresh series. Thank you so very much for watching. If you've enjoyed this video, please do give it a like. If you didn't, give it a dislike. Either way, let me know in the comments below why you did or didn't like it. Check out all the other videos in this little series in the links up in the top right. Hang on, no. Anyway, check them out, and if you're not already, get yourself subscribed to the channel so you can keep up to date when more videos come out. Massive thanks to those of you out there who are supporting the channel through Patreon and the YouTube membership. Things that happen on this channel happen because of you guys, so thanks very much for that. And also massive thanks to Kellermann, who've provided all the electrics for this video and allowed me to install some of their sexy little indicators onto my sexy little bike. So with this job finished, everything squared away and ready to move on to the next install, keep yours shiny, and I'll see you next time. Ta-ra!